The alarm screamed at 6:30 a.m., but Maya Chen had been awake for 20 minutes, staring at the ceiling of her cramped Tokyo apartment. 7 hours of sleep should have been enough. The fitness app said so. Her doctor said so. Yet her body felt like she'd been awake all night, her mind already racing through the endless meetings, waiting at her consulting firm. She rolled out of bed, joints protesting despite her 28 years, and caught herself in the bathroom mirror. The face looking back showed puffy eyes, skin that seemed to age faster than her passport suggested, and the particular exhaustion that came from years of pushing through. Maya had tried everything: keto, intermittent fasting, CrossFit at dawn, meditation apps, sleep trackers that buzzed her wrist raw. Nothing stuck, nothing worked. In the kitchen, she grabbed her usual breakfast, a protein bar and black coffee, eaten standing while scrolling through work emails. The ceramic rice bowl her grandmother had left her sat unused in the cabinet, too small for anything substantial, too delicate for her rushed mornings. On the train to Shibuya, Maya noticed something that had puzzled her for months. Her colleague Akiko, who sat 2 desks away, seemed to move through life with an ease that defied logic. At 62, Akiko's skin had a quiet luminosity. Her energy remained steady through 14-hour days, and her weight hadn't changed in the 3 years Maya had known her. Yet, Maya had never seen her at the company gym, or heard her mention any diet. "You always look tired, Maya-san," Akiko said gently as they settled into their seats. "Are you sleeping?" Maya wanted to laugh. She tracked her sleep religiously, aimed for 8 hours, took melatonin, kept her room dark. But sleeping and resting, she was beginning to suspect, were different things entirely. "I sleep enough. I just wake up tired." Akiko nodded with understanding that carried no judgment. "Ah, your nervous system is working too hard, even while you sleep." The phrase lingered as Maya's day dissolved into back-to-back client calls, lunch eaten at her desk, and the familiar afternoon crash that sent her reaching for her 3rd coffee. By evening, her body felt simultaneously wired and exhausted, as if someone had been pressing the accelerator and brake at the same time for months. Walking home through Shibuya's neon chaos, Maya passed a small traditional restaurant where she glimpsed families eating slowly, children holding chopsticks with concentration, elderly couples sharing small portions from ceramic dishes that reminded her of her grandmother's bowl. The scene felt foreign, despite being steps from her apartment, as if she'd forgotten how to inhabit time differently. That night, reaching for her usual late dinner of convenience store onigiri eaten while watching Netflix, Maya paused. Her grandmother's rice bowl caught the light from her phone screen, its simple blue pattern somehow reproachful. She'd inherited it 2 years ago, along with vague memories of multi-course dinners that lasted hours, her grandmother moving between kitchen and table with unhurried grace. Maya picked up the bowl, surprised by its weight and warmth. Such a small thing. Her usual portion of rice would overflow it completely. She found herself wondering what would happen if she used it anyway, if she slowed down enough to actually sit at her tiny table instead of eating standing up, scrolling through her phone. The thought felt simultaneously appealing and terrifying. In her world of optimized everything, deliberately eating less from a smaller bowl seemed almost rebellious. But as she held the ceramic in her palms, feeling its smooth surface grown warm from her hands, Maya realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt truly satisfied after eating, truly rested after sleeping, truly calm in her own skin. Outside, Tokyo hummed with its relentless energy, millions of people rushing toward tomorrow. But inside her small kitchen, holding her grandmother's bowl, Maya felt something shift. A tiny crack in the armor of her perfectly planned, perpetually exhausting life. If you've ever felt tired even after a full night of sleep, or frustrated with diets that don't last, tell us in the comments which part of this story feels familiar, and stay with us for the next chapters. The next morning, Maya found herself standing in her kitchen at 6:45 a.m., holding her grandmother's rice bowl and feeling slightly ridiculous. She'd measured out her usual portion of breakfast rice and realized it would require 2 bowlfuls. The rational part of her mind, the part trained in efficiency and maximization, screamed that this was wasteful, complicated, definitely not optimized. But Akiko's words echoed. Your nervous system is working too hard. Maya filled the small bowl once, set it on her table instead of the counter, and sat down. The silence felt strange. No podcast, no emails, no Twitter feed scrolling past. Just her, the rice, and the morning light filtering through her small window. She picked up chopsticks, another departure from her usual fork-shoveling technique, and took a bite. The rice tasted like rice. Not revolutionary, but somehow more present. Real. She chewed slowly, partly because the chopsticks forced her to, partly because she had nowhere else to rush. Halfway through the bowl, something unexpected happened. She felt satisfied. Not full, not stuffed, but genuinely content. At work, Maya mentioned her small experiment to Akiko during their coffee break. "Ah, you discovered Harahachi Bu," Akiko smiled. "My grandmother taught me this. Eat until 80% full. The stomach needs 20 minutes to tell the brain it's satisfied. When you eat slowly, you hear the conversation." Maya nodded, though part of her wondered if she was overcomplicating something as basic as breakfast. Her friend Jessica from the gym would definitely think so. Jessica lived on protein shakes, intermittent fasting, and the kind of discipline that Maya both admired and found exhausting. That evening, Akiko invited Maya to join her for a late dinner near the office. Maya expected a restaurant, but Akiko led her to a tiny shop that sold only miso soup, pickled vegetables, and small portions of grilled fish. The elderly woman behind the counter moved with deliberate slowness, warming the miso in individual bowls, arranging the pickles with care. "This is too small for dinner," Maya whispered, looking at the modest portions. "Wait," Akiko said gently. They ate slowly, partly because the shop had only 4 seats and encouraged lingering, partly because the food seemed to demand attention. The miso soup was warm and complex, the pickled vegetables bright and sharp, the fish simple but perfectly prepared. Maya found herself putting down her chopsticks between bites, talking with Akiko about work, about Tokyo, about the strange exhaustion that seemed to follow their generation everywhere. 20 minutes later, Maya realized she felt completely satisfied. Not the heavy, slightly guilty satisfaction of her usual large dinners, but a quiet contentment that seemed to radiate from her center outward. "How is this possible?" she asked, looking at her empty bowls. "Your body has been shouting for so long, it forgot how to whisper," Akiko said. "When you slow down, you can hear what it actually needs." Walking home, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in months, her digestion working peacefully, without the bloating and discomfort that usually followed dinner. Her energy felt steady rather than the usual post-meal crash, followed by late-night sugar cravings. That night, she prepared her dinner using her grandmother's bowl again. Rice, leftover vegetables, a small piece of fish. She ate at her table, chopsticks in hand, phone in another room. The portion looked tiny on her regular plate, but in the small bowl it appeared complete, intentional. As she finished, Maya noticed her usual urge to snack while watching TV had simply disappeared. Her body felt calm, satisfied, ready for rest rather than more stimulation. She found herself preparing for bed an hour earlier than usual, not from tiredness, but from a strange new sense of completion. Using her grandmother's bowl was starting to feel less like a diet and more like remembering something she'd forgotten, a different rhythm, a different relationship with hunger and satisfaction, a different way of moving through the evening hours. But the real test would come tomorrow and the day after. Maya had learned not to trust her enthusiasm for new habits. They always started with promise and faded into another item on her list of failed attempts at changing her perpetually tired, perpetually rushing life. 3 weeks later, Maya stood in her kitchen preparing breakfast and realized something had shifted without her noticing. The small rice bowl had become automatic, not a conscious choice requiring willpower. Her body seemed to expect the slower rhythm, the deliberate pauses, the conversations with her hunger that happened when she ate with chopsticks at her table. More surprisingly, the changes had begun extending beyond meals. She found herself walking more slowly on her way to work, noticing things, the way morning light hit building windows, the deliberate movements of elderly people practicing Tai Chi in the small park near her apartment. Her sleep, while still imperfect, had gained a quality of actual rest rather than just unconsciousness. Jessica noticed first. "You look different," she said after their weekly coffee, studying Maya's face with the intensity she usually reserved for checking her fitness tracker. Losing weight, new skincare routine. Maya considered explaining about the rice bowl, the slow eating, the way her evening sugar cravings had simply evaporated. But something in Jessica's expression, the familiar hunger for a quick fix, a product to buy, a routine to copy, made her hesitate. "Just sleeping better, I think." "Oh, well, whatever it is, keep it up. You look calmer." That afternoon, Akiko invited Maya to visit her apartment after work. Maya expected something modern, minimalist, in the way young professionals in Tokyo arranged their spaces. Instead, she found a home that felt like stepping into a different century. Tatami mats, low furniture, sliding paper screens that filtered the evening light into something gentle and warm. "This is where I learned to eat," Akiko said, setting a small table with dishes that matched Maya's grandmother's bowl. My mother, her mother, their mothers. Same bowls, same rhythm. They prepared dinner together. Miso soup, pickled vegetables, small portions of fish and rice. But Maya noticed something she'd missed in restaurants. The preparation itself was part of the eating. Akiko moved without hurry, washing each vegetable with attention, arranging the food with care that bordered on ceremony. "In the West, you think of eating as fuel, yes?" Akiko asked, setting Maya's portion in the familiar small bowl. "Pour it in quickly, get energy, move to next task. But eating is how we teach our nervous system about safety, about abundance, about time." Maya ate slowly, tasting the complexity in the simple miso, feeling her body respond not just to the food, but to the environment, the soft light, the quiet, the absence of screens and notifications. As they finished, she felt something she'd been chasing with supplements and sleep apps, genuine calm. "I've been eating too fast my whole life," Maya said suddenly. "Yes, and when you eat too fast, everything becomes too fast. Work, sleep, relationships, thoughts. The bowl is not about food. It's about rhythm." Walking home, Maya passed a convenience store where she used to buy late-night snacks, cookies, chips, the kind of mindless eating that happened while watching Netflix. She realized she hadn't entered that store in weeks, not from willpower or restriction, but from simple lack of interest. Her body seemed to have remembered something about satisfaction that made those foods feel less like treats and more like interruptions. But the real test came the following week when her company's deadline season arrived. 14-hour days, client dinners, the kind of pressure that had always sent her back to coffee and protein bar living, eating, standing up while responding to emails. The first crisis evening, Maya found herself standing in her kitchen at 10 p.m., exhausted and starving, holding her grandmother's bowl. Every instinct screamed to abandon this slow-eating experiment, order pizza, eat it directly from the box while collapsing on her couch. Instead, she filled the bowl with leftover rice and vegetables, sat at her table, picked up chopsticks. The first few bites felt forced, performative. But gradually, as her breathing slowed and her nervous system downshifted from crisis mode, Maya felt her body remember. This was how she ended days now. This was how she transitioned from work to rest, from rushing to being present in her own life. 20 minutes later, she felt ready for sleep, rather than more stimulation. Her body felt nourished rather than stuffed. The day's stress seemed to settle rather than spiral into late-night anxiety and snacking. Maya realized she'd found something that felt sustainable, not because it required constant willpower, but because it had become simply how she lived. Would you rather force yourself with willpower or redesign your environment and habits like this character is learning to do? Comment which path makes more sense to you, and share this episode with someone who needs a gentler approach to change. 2 months into her new rhythm, Maya faced her first real challenge, a week-long business trip to Osaka for client presentations. The trip meant hotel breakfasts, restaurant dinners, the kind of disrupted schedule that had always derailed her previous attempts at healthy habits. She packed her grandmother's rice bowl in her carry-on, wrapped carefully in a hotel towel. The first morning in Osaka, Maya sat in her hotel room with convenience store rice and pickled vegetables, eating from the familiar ceramic bowl while her colleagues downstairs attacked the breakfast buffet. Through her window, she watched early morning joggers in the park, their movements unhurried despite the exercise, and realized something about her relationship with discipline had fundamentally changed. This didn't feel like restriction or willpower. It felt like maintaining something precious, a quality of attention and calm that she'd spent years trying to achieve through meditation apps and productivity hacks, only to discover it had been available through something as simple as how she ate. The business dinners proved more challenging. Large portions, alcohol, the social pressure to match her colleagues' eating pace while discussing strategy and deadlines. But Maya found she could navigate these situations by eating slowly, focusing on conversation, allowing her natural satiety signals to guide her without making a performance of being different. "You barely touched your food," her colleague David noticed after the third dinner, concern mixing with the competitive edge he brought to everything. "Are you on some kind of diet?" Maya considered her response carefully. David lived on the same caffeine and ambition fuel that had powered her own life until recently. Explaining about nervous system regulation and eating until 80% full would sound like wellness nonsense to someone who viewed his body as a machine requiring optimization. "Just not that hungry," she said. But Akiko, who had joined the trip for client relations, caught Maya's eye across the table with a small, knowing smile. Later, as they walked back to the hotel, Akiko spoke quietly. "You're learning to trust your body's voice instead of your mind's panic." Is it that obvious? Only to someone who has made the same journey. Most people eat their anxiety, their boredom, their need for control. You're learning to eat your hunger. On the train back to Tokyo, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced after previous business trips. She felt like herself. Usually, travel disrupted everything: sleep, eating, exercise routines, leaving her more exhausted than when she'd left. But maintaining her small, consistent ritual had created a through line, a sense of continuity that seemed to anchor her nervous system regardless of location. She realized the bowl had become more than a portion control tool. It was a daily practice of slowing down, of listening to her body's actual signals rather than her mind's constant demands for more, faster, different. Back in her Tokyo apartment, Maya stood in her kitchen preparing dinner and noticed her reflection in the window. Something in her face looked different. Not just the slightly leaner features that came from eating appropriate portions, but a quality of ease she hadn't seen in years. Her shoulders sat lower. Her breathing seemed deeper. She moved through her evening routine with less urgency, more presence. Jessica noticed too, but her reaction was different now. "Okay, seriously, what's your secret?" she demanded over coffee, her energy carrying an edge of frustration. "Some new supplement? Personal trainer? You look like you've been to a spa for 2 months." Maya held her coffee cup. She'd switched from large to small cups months ago without really thinking about it, and tried to find words for a transformation that felt too simple to explain. "I've been eating differently, smaller portions, slower pace, using my grandmother's rice bowl." Jessica stared. "That's it? A smaller bowl? It's not really about the bowl. It's about listening to my body instead of overriding it all the time. That sounds like diet culture bullshit, Maya. Just eat less and move more, right? Maya felt the familiar urge to explain, to convince, to prove her approach was more sophisticated than it appeared. But sitting across from Jessica's exhausted eyes and caffeinated intensity, Maya realized something. She didn't need to convert anyone. The changes in her life were quiet, internal, sustainable in a way that didn't require others' validation or participation. Maybe, she said gently. It's working for me, though. That evening, as Maya prepared her dinner in the small ceramic bowl, she understood that she'd crossed some invisible threshold. This was no longer an experiment or a diet or a hack. This was simply how she lived now, attentive to her body's signals, respectful of its rhythms, curious about satisfaction rather than driven by deprivation or excess. 6 months after that first morning with her grandmother's rice bowl, Maya sat in her doctor's office staring at blood test results that looked like someone else's file. Her inflammatory markers had dropped significantly. Her blood pressure, which had been creeping toward concerning levels, was now well within normal range. Most surprisingly, her cortisol levels, chronically elevated for years, showed the steady rhythm of someone whose nervous system knew how to rest. "What have you been doing differently?" Dr. Yamamoto asked, comparing the new results with her previous tests. "These are substantial improvements." Maya almost laughed. The honest answer felt too simple, too domestic for a medical consultation. She'd been eating from a smaller bowl. She'd been chewing more slowly. She'd been treating meals as breaks rather than fuel stops. "I've been eating differently, less rushing, smaller portions." Dr. Yamamoto nodded approvingly. "Often, the most powerful interventions are the simplest. Your body was clearly in a chronic stress response. Changing how you eat can completely reshape your nervous system." Walking home from the appointment, Maya realized she'd been thinking about her transformation wrong. She'd focused on the bowl, the portions, the specific techniques Akiko had shared. But the real change was deeper. She'd stopped treating her body like a machine that needed to be managed and started treating it like a living system that deserved to be heard. The shift had rippled through everything. She slept better because her digestion wasn't working overtime through the night. She had steady energy because her blood sugar wasn't constantly spiking and crashing. She felt calmer because mealtimes had become moments of restoration rather than another task to optimize. That evening, Akiko joined Maya for dinner at her apartment, a reversal of their usual pattern. "You move differently now," Akiko observed, watching Maya prepare their meal with the same unhurried attention she'd learned to bring to eating. "Less like you're running from something." Maya paused, rice paddle in hand. "I think I was running from being in my body. Like if I moved fast enough, ate fast enough, stayed busy enough, I wouldn't have to feel how exhausted and uncomfortable I was. And now?" Maya considered as she filled the 2 small bowls, her grandmother's and a matching one she'd found at a ceramics shop in Shibuya. "Now it feels like my body and I are on the same team instead of in constant negotiation." They ate slowly, talking about work and weekend plans and Akiko's upcoming visit to her family in Kyoto. But Maya found herself equally present to the conversation and the food, the warmth of the miso soup, and the satisfaction building gradually in her belly, the way her breathing naturally slowed as her nervous system shifted into rest mode. "I have a confession," Maya said as they finished. "I used to think people who talked about listening to their bodies were just making excuses for being lazy. I thought discipline meant overriding physical signals, pushing through fatigue, eating what was right regardless of how it felt." Akiko smiled. "And now? Now I think I had it backwards. Real discipline is paying attention, responding to what your body actually needs instead of what your mind thinks it should need." After Akiko left, Maya stood in her kitchen washing the 2 small bowls, feeling the warm water and smooth ceramic under her hands. Through her window, Tokyo sparkled with its usual manic energy, millions of people rushing through their evening routines, grabbing convenience store dinners, eating while walking or working or scrolling through phones. She'd been one of them for so long that slowing down had initially felt like giving up, like admitting defeat in some race everyone else was winning. But standing in her quiet kitchen, energy steady and mind calm, Maya realized she hadn't dropped out of the race. She'd simply stopped running in the wrong direction. The rice bowl, her grandmother's rice bowl, sat drying on the counter, ready for tomorrow's breakfast. Such a small thing to anchor such a significant change. But Maya was beginning to understand that transformation often happened through tiny, consistent choices rather than dramatic overhauls. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Still feeling great? What's your secret for real this time?" Maya looked at the message, then at the bowl, then out at the city rushing past her window. She typed back, "Learning to eat like my grandmother did. Turns out the old ways knew something about living in a body that we forgot." The response came quickly. "That's it? Sounds too simple?" Maya smiled, remembering when she'd felt the same way. "The simple things are usually the hardest," she replied, then put her phone away and prepared for bed, moving through her evening routine with the same unhurried attention she'd learned to bring to every meal. 1 year later, Maya stood in her kitchen preparing breakfast, and the rice bowl felt as natural as breathing. She no longer thought about portion sizes or eating speed. Her body had internalized the rhythm. What started as a deliberate practice had become simply how she lived. The changes extended far beyond food. Maya had negotiated a schedule with her consulting firm that allowed for actual lunch breaks. She'd moved to a slightly larger apartment with morning light and space for a proper dining table. Most significantly, she'd started saying no to social obligations that required her to abandon her evening routine, something that would have felt impossible when she'd believed that accommodating others was more important than maintaining her own energy. Jessica had eventually asked for details about Maya's approach, but when Maya explained about eating slowly and honoring satiety signals, Jessica had declared it too complicated and returned to her cycle of extreme diets followed by frustrated rebounds. Maya felt sad about their growing distance, but no longer felt responsible for proving her choices or converting others to her way of living. Dr. 8. Yamamoto had used Maya's case as an example during a presentation about lifestyle interventions, though he'd focused on the metabolic improvements rather than the rice bowl that had started everything. Maya didn't mind the clinical framing. She understood that what had happened to her was simultaneously very simple and nearly impossible to replicate without the same internal readiness to change. Akiko had become not just a colleague, but a genuine friend, someone who understood that choosing to live differently in a culture obsessed with speed and excess required constant, gentle vigilance. They often shared meals together, moving through their routines with the unhurried attention that had taught Maya the difference between being busy and being productive, between being full and being satisfied. On this particular morning, Maya's phone rang as she finished breakfast. Her cousin calling from San Francisco, voice tight with familiar exhaustion. "I'm falling apart, Maya. I can't sleep, can't lose weight, feel like I'm constantly behind. You always sounded so stressed when we talked, but you seem different now, calmer. What changed?" Maya looked at her grandmother's rice bowl, empty now, but still warm from the morning's rice. She thought about how to explain a year of small, consistent changes to someone who was probably hoping for a book recommendation or a supplement to order online. "I started eating from a smaller bowl," she said finally. "That's it?" Maya smiled, hearing her own skepticism from a year ago. "It's not really about the bowl. It's about slowing down enough to hear what your body actually needs, treating meals like rest instead of just fuel. Learning to trust your body's signals instead of overriding them constantly. Sounds too simple to work." The simple things are usually the hardest, Maya said, echoing her text to Jessica months ago. But if you want to try, start with one meal. Sit down, eat slowly, stop when you feel satisfied instead of full. See how it feels. After the call, Maya prepared for work with the same unhurried attention she brought to everything now. She moved through her morning routine, knowing that her evening would end with dinner at her table, eaten from the ceramic bowl that had taught her to listen to her own body, rather than the constant noise of a culture that confused speed with success. At work, newer employees often asked Maya about her energy, her apparent immunity to the afternoon crashes that plagued most of their colleagues. She'd learned to share simple techniques, eating slowly, taking actual lunch breaks, treating her body with the same respect she'd give a valued friend, without trying to convince anyone to change. That evening, as Maya prepared dinner and set her grandmother's bowl on the table, she reflected on how much her relationship with change itself had evolved. She'd spent years looking for the perfect diet, the optimal workout, the right supplement to fix her constant fatigue and stress. The solution had been available the entire time in her kitchen cabinet, wrapped in memories of slower meals and different rhythms. Sitting down to eat, Maya held the warm ceramic in her hands for a moment before beginning. Such a small thing. A bowl inherited from someone who'd understood intuitively what Maya had needed a year to learn. That eating was how you taught your nervous system about safety and abundance. That slowing down was not giving up, but tuning in. That the body's wisdom was more sophisticated than any app or program designed to optimize it. Outside her window, Tokyo continued its restless motion, millions of people moving through their evening routines. But inside her apartment, Maya ate slowly and with attention, honoring the hunger that brought her to the table and the satisfaction that would eventually tell her to stop. When she finished, Maya washed the bowl carefully and set it on the counter to dry, ready for tomorrow's breakfast. Ready to continue teaching her what she was still learning. That transformation happened not through dramatic gestures, but through small, consistent acts of listening to the wisdom her body had been offering all along. If this story reminded you that real transformation comes from small habits repeated over time, not from overnight fixes, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to start this journey with you in the next story.